All right, we will call this city council regular meeting agenda for June 26, 2023 at 6:30 PM to order. If you would, please rise as we join in our invocation and our two pledges. I'm going to come over here to the floor. We have one of our Boy Scout leaders here today, and so if you would, join us down there. There we go. And when we are done with the pledges and the invocation, please stay standing for a moment of silence. We're going to go right into for Mayor Reed. So just hang on 1 second if you would. So with that, if you would, bow as we pray. Heavenly Father, we just want to come and ask you to be a part of these proceedings tonight and come and be over our proceeding, our meetings, everyone that's here, our council, our staff, our city manager, city attorney, city secretary, all the staff, the men and women and our first responders that are out there protecting us and interceding on our behalf. And we thank them for every single thing that they do every single day. Father, across our country, those that do the same for our country, we thank you for them. We ask that you protect them. We ask that you guide them. Guide this council as we deliberate about the business, the important business of this city, as everything that we do is important. It's important to our citizens, and it's important to everyone that calls Pearland home. Father, we do enter tonight with a heavy heart and ask you to lift up the family of Tom Reed. Tonight, we lost a true gentleman in his passing, but Father, you're here to heal. You're here to guide. You're here to comfort us during this time. So we just ask that we draw on your strength, this week as we celebrate his life, and we bring respect and honor to a life very well lived. In Christ's name I pray, amen. Join with the American.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the Texas pledge. Allegiance, Texas.
One state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for coming down and being a part of that. So if you'll just stay standing, as we all know, we lost a giant on Saturday. Mayor Emeritus Tom Reed passed away in the early evening on Saturday. So if you would, just join us in a moment of silence for this time. Thank you for that. Be seated. Thank you very much. Before we move on in our agenda, real quick, more and more information on Mayor Reed's arrangements will be coming out. But I can tell you, as of right now, there will be two different opportunities, two different celebrations, if you will. One, a very, very somber, respectful opportunity at First Church right here off of Broadway, Friday afternoon, evening, from 4 to 8. He will be laying in repose there with officers where the community can come in and pay their respects to him. Come and go. That's what that's meant to be, just the opportunity for the greater community to be able to come in and say goodbye to a great man. And then Saturday morning, July the 1st, right there back at First Church, we will have a celebration of his life beginning at 10 o'clock a.m. So internment and all of that will be private family ceremony and family only. So more to come as those details will be coming out in the next day. I'm quite sure we'll be putting them up social media and other places as well. So again, lost a giant of a man. At some respects, we always knew this day would be here. Doesn't make it any easier when it actually happens. In many, many ways, I thought he would outlive every one of us, uh, and uh, and can understand that. So, like I said, great man, and you're going to see and hear some incredible testimonies of his life and what he meant to people over the week to come. So, with that, we'll move forward in our agenda. Roll call and certification of quorum. Madam Secretary, I'll certify that we have a quorum present, as all members are present with the exception of Member Kamkar and Member Hernandez. I did hear from Member Hernandez that he would be absent from the chamber for the evening. I'm not sure about Member Kamkar. I think he is going to be absent for the remainder of the evening. With that, we'll turn to citizens' comments. I believe we had no comments forward, so appreciate that. Now, moving to public hearing number one, staff report. I'll ask Martin, are you going to throw it open? If you'll read into the record why the reason for the public hearing, and then move right into staff report.
Sure thing, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and Council. First public hearing is the request by the City of Pearland applicant for approval of proposed amendments to the Unified Development Code, Ordinance number 2000T, in accordance with Section 1.1.4.1 of the UDC to include 1. Amendments to Chapter 1, Section 1133A2, advisory capacity of the Planning and Zoning Commission to the City Council to review, prepare reports upon, and make recommendations concerning approval, conditional approval, or denial of conditional use permits, petitions. And then number 2, amendments to Chapter 2, Section 2.2.3.3b, processing of application and decision regarding the role of the Planning and Zoning Commission to review and comment on conditional use permit petitions. So going into the staff report and discussion, this came out of discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission that then requested staff to bring forward additional discussion on possible Unified Development Code text amendments to have formal voting on conditional use permit items that come before their commission. Under current rules, as written in the UDC, the Planning and Zoning Commission advises City Council and takes care of the first public hearing on those requests. At that time, the Commission reviews, prepares a report, and then makes a recommendation concerning approval, conditional approval, or denial on a variety of application types that are listed below. Where this comes into concern for conditional use permits is listed on number 2 there in bold, where you can see that petitions for conditional use permits are then heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Again, under current rules, Section 2233 of the UDC discusses having a joint discussion of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council. Though we've now adopted a split approach, it just doesn't reflect it in the UDC. It reflects it in language further down in that section. It states that an application for a conditional use permit should be presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and comment, and that the City Council shall then conduct a public hearing and following receipt of those comments from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that the council will be the final decision maker. So out of all of that, basically the Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory when it comes to conditional use permits. Their role is simply to gather facts, gather input, and then deliver that within the report that staff then presents to City Council. So staff came up with 2 options that were presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The first option would be to have a formal vote on the night of the initial public hearing, and then that that recommendation, whether it's to approve or deny, would then go to City Council, and it would have to, approval of the conditional use permit would require just a simple majority of all members that were present. What that looks like is written here in Exhibit A, Option 1, where you can see that Planning and Zoning Commission has their recommendation on the night of the hearing, and then we bump down to paragraph 3 for the City Council vote. And the last line has conditional use permit gaining approval with a simple majority of the City Council. Option 2 is more of a status quo and cleanup. So it modifies bits out of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 to have more of a streamlined approach. So as you can see here, it removes out of Chapter 1, Section 1133 on the right, the actual the capacity for the Planning and Zoning Commission to make a recommendation on the CUP, and then moves that over to paragraph 2 under 2233 on the left-hand side, where it says that the Planning and Zoning Commission action is an application for a conditional use permit shall be presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and comment only. So it removes the discrepancy between the two sections and makes the language a little cleaner. So all of this was discussed and has been discussed in various forms, but it was on their June 5th regular meeting for the Planning and Zoning Commission. At that time, the commission generally discussed the effect of the formal vote and how their comments were recorded and presented, and that there were no additional public comments received. After discussion, a motion was made to recommend option 1, and that was approved by a 5-0 vote. And just to add an additional point of clarification, this would not change how staff presents to the City Council. You will still receive the P&Z draft minutes and the breakdown that we provide of the discussion points and the highlights. So either way, you're still getting quality content from staff. Mayor, with that, I'll pass back to you.
I was going to say nothing changes on our end. Since the applicant is also the city, we can bypass the applicant's presentation unless you'd like to say that over again, Martin. So with that, we'll move to those wishing to speak for or against this proposed request. Can go to the podium, give your name and address. Have 3 minutes to speak. Second call, those wishing to speak for or against this proposed request. Last and final time, those wishing to speak for or against this proposed request. Seeing none, we'll move to City Council for questions, comments, concerns. Member Carbone.
Thank you, Mayor. I think option 1's great. It's nice to have a vote, and that way you don't have to answer the question, how did P&Z feel? And
yeah,
some nodded, some didn't nod. I don't know. Having a vote, I think, will clearly communicate much better to us to help us inform the decision. So thank you.
I agree. I think option 1 is the better choice. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I'll just echo option 1 seems to be the right one. What I also like about this is it doesn't stop or slow or change really our process. It codifies our process with a vote, an actual formal vote, and it doesn't change if they would have denied one. It doesn't cause a supermajority at the council. So I like this. One of the things that has always bothered me is in one respect, when planning and zoning would meet in here for joint meetings, it felt like there was, heavy-handedness at the P&Z sometimes, and they really didn't get to be free to speak. Having the separate ones, they have a little bit more freedom, and I think they open up, and I think that's candid, or it's candid, but I think that's needed, and I think that's warranted. And then, as mentioned, giving them kind of on the record of what they would do with the CUP is good to have. Any other comments or questions?
I thought in the past when when planning and zoning voted, we did have to have a supermajority with council if it was denied. Is that wrong?
That changed when CUPs were taken out of being a zoning item.
Gotcha.
Zoning is
Thank you.
what requires the supermajority vote.
Thank you. So does this add any more time to the applicant? No more additional back and forth or anything like that? I'm good with it as long as it doesn't add any of that.
It's the same process that we have now. They're just going to have a formal vote that's actually recorded versus not. Correct?
Correct.
That's it. Last call. All right, we will close this public hearing, move to new business item number 1. Mr. Carbone, would you present that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance 2000T-39, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We've had staff report and opportunity to weigh in on it. Madam Secretary, we'll call for the vote.
Member Carbone,
Aye.
Member Cade,
Aye.
Member Berry,
Aye.
Member Patel,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Koza.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Excellent. We'll move to public hearing number 2. Joel, I'll let you read into the record the reason for the public hearing and go right into your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is the second public hearing tonight and also the second of 2 public hearings that we are required to have for the planning and implementation process associated with our annual action plan for the Community Development Block Grant Program. So this is something we regularly present to the public and council, and are doing so tonight to provide some additional input as far as the planning process for our 17th annual action plan process. So just as usual, we have to cover some of this information just to make sure the public is aware of the purpose and parameter for the Community Development Block Grant Program. We receive these funds as part of our status as an entitlement jurisdiction. When we reached a population of over 50,000 in 2006, we were able to receive funds directly from HUD as opposed to being a pass-through through Brazoria County. So at that point, we became subject to the entitlement rules, got our funds directly, and each year we're able to determine how we spend those funds based on the 24 allowable spending categories that HUD provides for the Community Development Block Grant Program. And the purpose of the program is basically to do one of 3 things. It's a general anti-poverty strategy put in place by the HUD Act, but we are to use these funds to remove slum and blight. We can use them to meet a local urgent need. So if there is a disaster similar to Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Ike, HUD has made allocations to the state that trickle down to us in the form of disaster recovery and mitigation funds. But for the purpose of this program, this is our small annual allocation that we receive. But the same rules apply to all of those dollars, no matter where they come from. And the primary focus of our resources here in Pearland are going to be to serve the low to moderate income population. And that's defined as individuals and or households that are at or below 80% of the metropolitan statistical area income. And I have a slide that talks about how that's changed from last year to this year. Generally speaking, we can do work in areas that benefit 51% or more low to moderate income, but Pearland is known as an exception grantee, so we get a break on that percentage calculation for some technical reasons that relate to our census data, and that puts us at 45%. Just a little bit of information as to how we get the money. It's a formula allocation. HUD allocates based on 2 formulas. We fall into that Formula A, which the basic difference between the 2 is that Formula B is going to focus on older cities because it's got that pre-1940s housing units that's heavily weighted at 50% in the scoring rubric in the calculation. In Formula A, it's more of a overcrowded housing situation, which is lesser weighted, and Pearland weighs even lesser when you statistically put us in that category. So that's how they determine what funds we receive. And we don't just get the money and run. We have to complete some requirements, and one of those is the annual action plan. And that plan requires that we conduct an update to our assessment of existing housing and economic issues, other areas of local concern, where our public infrastructure and neighborhood services stand as far as the ability to meet local unmet needs, and all these other categories that are listed there. We do an annual reassessment of that and come to a conclusion as to what local priorities the funds need to address. Just to give you an idea of what the income levels look like as far as who we can serve with these funds, based on a number of people that are in a household, HUD disaggregates the 80% or below metropolitan statistical area categories in a way that allows us to determine if we're serving low-income people, extremely low income, or those that are very low income. And if you look at the aspects of the chart that are in red, in the red square, you can see that a family of 4 can make as much as $89,100 and still receive benefit from the program. And this changes every year. So I mentioned area benefit projects. So if we're doing something that's going to impact a neighborhood or a census block group, this type of work has to fall within areas that are majority low to moderate income. And for Pearland, this is changing a great deal. Based on the last census, it seems like every year our area is getting condensed more and more. So we've got less opportunity to spend. But historically, since I've been here, it has this area that you see shaded in blue has been pretty consistent. And I think some of the areas that we've lost have been related to the 2020 census and possibly even some coronavirus dynamics in the census demography. But I'm confident that that might change back to what we saw before that allowed that area west of track 660, 500 block group 5, which is between Garden Road and Cullen. So I think we'll see that come back and expand some of our service area opportunities in the future. But for now, this is what we're dealing with in 2023, 2024. The slide gives you an opportunity to see the historical allocations that have been made to the city and what's been spent and what we have in the form of open available balances. The areas in blue on these bar graph charts show money that we have spent, and the areas in orange are the unspent open project balances. This is coming to a close, if you will. We've done a good job of getting some of our slow spending improved. We do have some open facility improvement projects, one of which is the Knapp Center expansion that's being proposed for additional funds tonight. And we're on our way to make some of these projects come to conclusion very soon. But for now, we do have some unspent funds. Also want to point out that the 2010 and 2021 years are where you see 2 allocations. Those are because there was a Recovery Act or some type of economic stimulus associated with that year's allocation. And in 2010, we had the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. And 2021, those are our coronavirus funds that came through HUD, through the CDBG program. So in addition to the CARES Act allocation and ARPA funds that we got, HUD gave us some CARES Act funds as well. And we've still got the capability of using some of those dollars through 2026, I believe. So this kind of gives you an idea of where we are in our 5-year planning process. If you recall, last year we went through the consolidated plan process, which was much bigger and gave us the opportunity to assess community conditions in a way that would give us a 5-year outlook of what our priorities should be. And we're now in year 2 of that 5-year consolidated plan process, and we will continue to implement programs and services consistent with the consolidated plan priorities. So now to the good stuff. We have thought about the program priorities that the 5-year plan put us in position to prioritize and what we're doing on an annual basis. And this kind of provides council and the public with a visual of what we propose could be an annual allocation spending plan for next year. We do want to take advantage of the full amount of the program administration cap, and that's important because we've added staff. Maybe a good opportunity to introduce Michael Rollinson. He's in the audience. Michael comes to us through Horn LLP, which was an intermediary for TDM and FEMA, and did a lot of work with us under Hurricane Ike. So he's very familiar with the grants world and a lot of familiarity with disaster recovery. He now joins our team. So we've got some added responsibility to make sure costs involving staff and our professional development and administration and oversight of the program are in place. So I think it's important for us to take advantage of that. We may or may not spend all that, but I think it's good for us to budget in that regard for next year. Social services is capped at 15%. Unfortunately, if I were Secretary HUD for a day, I'd flip that around. I think the 20% should be more on the social services side and a lesser program administration. But we do find other ways to help the social services agencies that are not within that category. So we still give out more money along those lines. It's just, these are for program services. So this is rental assistance, mental health services, and some of the other things that go along with helping the community. We get away with being able to spend money on public facility improvements, and that's where we help some of those agencies in other ways. Housing Rehab Administration staff has recently gone through a preliminary assessment of where we are with a large allocation of funds that we administered in 2018. And unfortunately, due to coronavirus and some other impediments, we weren't spending that money as quickly. We used some of those years as planning years, so we've got a good amount of leftover available for us to get through a good part of next year. If we run into a situation where we don't have available funds to make it through the fiscal year, we'll pull back on some unallocated resources that we have in the CDBG available balance and have those amended to be able to spend on the housing rehabs themselves. But this is the $70,000 you see there is for personnel costs associated with housing rehab officer. And lastly, I think our assessment based on what's coming around as far as the NAP Center expansion is indicative of us needing a few more bucks there. So we're gonna propose to allocate another $233,000 towards construction for that project. And that project, just to give you an update, has been out for bid under the design solicitation. We've recently selected a successful offer and are in the final stage of negotiating price there, and we'll be coming to council very soon for the architectural piece associated with that. So we're excited that we believe this proposal will allocate the resources needed for that project to come to completion. So that puts us at the grand total of $466,162 for FY24. Just a reminder, that's HUD program year 23. That gets confusing because they're a year behind us. But just wanted to make sure that that's clear. A little bit on the next steps. So tonight actually kicks off the public comment period, which lasts for 30 days. And that will get us through July 27th. Meanwhile, we will be working on the action plan itself, and we'll post a draft so that the public is able to access that information. They can come to City Hall, look at a physical copy of it, or they can email staff or contact the city otherwise, and we'll electronically provide that. But there'll be an electronic version posted online so that the public can take a look at the details there. And then by August the 14th, we'll come back to council to have you adopt the plan, and we'll immediately submit it to HUD thereafter. And that wraps up my staff presentation. If there are any questions.
Very good, Joel.
comments,
Thank you for
pass it.
that. It's always good. It's always a good action plan as we move it forward. Lots of work ahead, and it's been a good program for a lot of people over the years. With that, we'll move to the second item under our public hearing, and that's those wishing to speak or address and make public comment on this public hearing. Can go to the podium, give your name and address for the record, and 3 minutes to speak. Second attempt, those wishing to speak out and provide public comment on this CDBG funding. And third and final time, those wishing to address council on our 2024 CDBG funding block grant dollars. Seeing none, we'll move forward to those on council wishing to speak or offer questions, comments, or concerns. Anything? All good. The only thing, again, Joel, just very good presentation. As always, this been a program that's it's helped a lot of different areas of town. It's actually helped a lot of smaller projects that don't ever seem to rise to the occasion of a bond program and those types of things. We're able to come in. We've done some drainage projects. We've done some water and sewer projects over the years, sidewalk projects that just don't rise to the level to be able to do a larger projects. And so we're able to come back in and get those done. You mentioned in one of the slides how it's not under the CDBG, but through HUD that we get mitigation funds and those types of things. Last week, we have been awarded $14 million through HUD that's gone through the GLO. We have 3 projects that was not in the bond program for drainage. So an additional $14 million in drainage projects that we didn't need to go to the voters for because it's outside funding, but we can get those on the street and rolling forward sooner. In fact, right now. So that's just, people always tell me it's still our tax dollars. It is. It's your income tax dollars that are going to DC, but coming back here. And I'd rather get as many of our dollars back in here locally and keeping our property taxes where we need to keep them one way or the other. And so it is our tax dollars. So we want to be diligent in how we use them. We want to be diligent in how they get spent, and all the reason to have Joel and now Michael on board. So Michael, you speak DC? Okay. All right. Plain English here. I know it means something there.
Now I have somebody to talk to there, so.
They start going off on all their acronyms and numbers and all that kind of stuff, and you're just like, okay, speak English to me. So, all right, well, good deal. I appreciate you guys for what you do. We'll end this public hearing number 2. We'll move to the consent agenda. I was going to have Mr. Carbone, if you would present the consent agenda, items A through K, with the exception of F, as in Frank.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, approval of consent agenda items A through K with the exception of F. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, call for the vote.
Member Carbone?
Aye.
Member Cade?
Aye.
Member Berry?
Aye.
Member Patel?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Koza.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
With council concurrence, would you be okay if we moved F up and took that out of order from matters removed consent agenda and go ahead and do it now? Any problem? All right. Mr. Carbone, go ahead and present item F, if you would.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, resolution R 2023-152. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. This item is an amendment to a professional service contract with DEC, who has done the design work on the Smith Ranch Road widening project. The Smith Ranch Road widening project starts just a little bit north of 518, where it goes to 2 lanes, and will widen Smith Ranch Road to a 4-lane boulevard cross-section all the way to Hughes Ranch Road. This project is funded through the TIP program, Transportation Improvement Program with HGAC, so it's about 80% funded with federal dollars. And so this amendment is we're very near finishing up the design work and getting ready to go to bids this fall. So this amendment incorporates a few different things. One of the things that occurred as we worked through the initial design work on the project is we got all of our documents ready for land acquisition and got environmental approval so that we could move forward with that. And it was at that point that TxDOT basically realized that some of the Texas mobility funds that had been allocated to the project could not be used to purchase off-system right-of-way. So we had to go back through with HGAC and TxDOT and modify the funding source in the TIP. And that took a couple of different iterations before they got that correct. Then we had to go back and update the advanced funding agreement with TxDOT. And by the time all that was completed and we were ready to move again, we were about 15 months delayed. And so At that point, we had to update the appraisals for the land acquisition. We had to go back and recheck the surveys to make sure no landowners had changed or anything like that. So we did an amendment to incorporate a lot of that work, but there was still some more of that is part of this amendment. And then it includes some additional driveways and other design changes at intersections. So the big part of that is at Wooten, or we changed on our thoroughfare plan Wooten Road to connect to basically where Smith Ranch Road number 2 hits on Smith Ranch Road. And then west of Smith Ranch Road, we added an extension of that over to the State Highway 288 frontage road as part of our agreement through the EDC or with the EDC with the Bucky's property to the north of there. So when that occurred, that went from basically a kind of a T intersection with a 12-foot road coming into Smith Ranch Road to a full-blown intersection with a much larger intersection with the road going both ways. And so that's another big part of it. And then working with DD4, they requested some additional driveway access and access at the slough for their maintenance of the slough, which caused some changes to the pond we're using there, which is a shared pond with DD4 and this project. And then with that, and then we also had to update the drainage impact and mitigation report. I believe TxDOT asked us to rerun that modeling with the Atlas 14 data. So all of these are additional things above the original design scope. And then we also added in the bid and construction phase services and reimbursables for the bidding and construction phases. So those add up to the total amount you see here in front of us today. So we're recommending the approval of this amendment and the additional amount of $165,335. Thank you.
All right. Rushi, did you pull this?
Yes, sir, I did.
Yeah.
So, I'm just kind of taken by the numbers. Trent, I know I had requested this information earlier and you provided, and I appreciate it. I'm having a hard time understanding, this project has been going on for, I believe, 4 years, 5 years? 16, okay. And so we're having these issues, and I understand we've had issues, but my understanding is a $12 million project, and we're paying 1.6 just for design. And I don't know, coming from a different side of the world, this is very, I'm having a hard time swallowing this pill. And I guess my neighbor here tells me this is normal, but I just can't accept it. So
I think maybe one thing I can help clarify is that that original scope was not just the design work. So typically when we do a city-funded project and we work the scope out for the engineering design services, we'll do a separate scope and contract for the land acquisition services, and that'll be a separate contract, and therefore you'll typically see a smaller percentage than you see here for the design work. This includes the land acquisition services, and we include that when we have one of these, what we learned earlier, the local government project procedure projects, the federally funded projects. We include that there so that we don't have to get another separate agreement through TxDOT for approval, and so we can get that 80% reimbursement through there. So that's why, on the front end, these when we do these projects, the design looks a little bit heavier. We are having to design and work through TxDOT's approval process. So there's some additional time that the engineers have to spend to work us through all the additional approvals of working through TxDOT, which we have to do when we use these federal dollars. So using the federal dollars, while it does cause some of the cost to increase, we are getting 80% of it funded by outside sources, with the city just providing 20% of that. Doesn't mean we don't watch the dollars like we do on every project, but it just, when you go through those federal approval processes, it just takes a lot more.
I guess the question is, we don't really have a choice. If I say no, or let's say the council says no to this extra work, then the project stops?
Essentially.
Sorry, I got a question real quick. So when this project was bid, didn't they know that could be a problem to begin with?
It's not been bid.
So
Not been bid.
Oh, it hadn't even started. That's right. You did land acquisition and stuff like that. So they have to know.
I think the issue comes in when, and again, this all goes through TxDOT, with TxDOT realizing this project is off system. So TxDOT funds projects both on system, meaning on their TxDOT system, like Broadway 518, 35, 521, and the like, 288. And then there's projects that are not on their system like this. Some of the others that we saw in our CIP workshop earlier, those will be off system, if we do that. So the way land acquisition goes through that changes, and it was TxDOT that realized this doesn't meet our goal, and again, having to change some of that. And projects go through an iteration of design work changes. You find out there are things on the ground, and I don't know about in this case, but there may be some pipeline issues that we know that there's a pipeline there, but until we get deeper into the design, you really don't know exactly what all it goes. So you start with your best known information, and then as things come about, some of that information changes over time. So that's happened on this.
That's
But
correct.
again,
And the Wooten Road thing, that was not on our thoroughfare plan as it is today when we started this design. So that's a true change in, what's occurred there. And then, of course, the other piece was between HGAC and TxDOT getting funds that couldn't be used for right-of-way acquisition initially allocated.
Well, and
go
on,
back through that
and on
process.
Wooten, we could have not changed that, but then come back with the Buc-ee's and everything else that's going to happen right there, and then realize, wait a minute, we need to build this road bigger. We need to build this intersection bigger.
Well, we'd be
We
back
just put
tearing it
fresh
out.
concrete on the ground. Now we're going to tear it all up. So that planning through this process changes some of this as well. So, but at the end of the day, and I don't want to make light of the dollar amount. If we were doing this project alone, it's $12.5 million on our own versus whatever the 20% cost is, $3 million or.
So let me clarify my previous question. My previous question was, this project has been awarded. It's been awarded to DEC, the engineering firm, who bid on this project to do all the due diligence associated with the purchase of the widening of Smith Ranch Road. So that being said, as time goes by, why do they not build in these contingencies associated with TxDOT projects, as they've probably done throughout their history as an engineering firm? And I, don't hate the player, hate the game, so to speak, is kind of where I'm at on this. I don't necessarily think that, just because we have, other issues that come up, that we're the ones that have to bite the bullet and suck it up and open our checkbooks. That's the point I was trying to make. So that's where I stand on it. I don't necessarily like it. I mean, again, I say that a lot up here. I don't like it, but it seems to be the status quo of the way things have gone over the years.
So
Just maybe a couple of clarifications on the engineering contracts. Those aren't bid, so they're not bidding, and we're not going with the low bidder. Those go through a qualification-based selection process. So we select them, and then we negotiate a contract based on that scope. And so I think, if we were to build in extra stuff in there, it's not like we're just adding this to add it. There's actual work here. And so the original scope not only goes through our review and our approval, we have to run it through TxDOT, and they run through the scope and the estimates and the cost of doing all the work, and they have to approve it as well. So if we had a bunch of extra funds in there at that point, they'd say, pull it out, because we want the scope, as tight as reasonable with the known information at the time. And I mean, these are true unknown occurrences that happened that don't happen on every project. I mean, they happen, they do happen, but we're the ones that changed our thoroughfare plan. So we want to make sure that intersection is correct and matches what our thoroughfare plan is today.
This has been going on since 2016.
Sure.
So we made this contract with them in 2016?
Yes. So that's often how long it takes to get through the process to do one of these federally funded projects. Now, this one had that 15-month delay in there with the funding issue, but normally we have to build in two and a half times the amount of time when we get federal funds to work through all the processes. We have to go through the full NEPA environmental process before we can even start right-of-way. Then we have to work through the right-of-way. We have to design to a large extent to TxDOT standards. We have to go through TxDOT design review. We have to go through their process for utility relocations. So it just adds a lot of time.
So Trent, when I look at this, this will be, if this gets approved, is $250,000 of change orders from them. We've done it $80,000 before,
That's correct.
and then we're doing another 165 today. So that's approximately $250,000, right? For me, I don't know about the rest of my peers here. I just have a hard time, and I understand this may be normal.
I would say this one's a little bit out of the norm because of the 15-month delay and basically having to go back and redo all of the right-of-way documents.
And I mean, I'm just kind of sitting here calculating per foot. Engineering costs are coming in at $480 almost, right? $480 a foot. I mean, that just, to me, it just blows my mind. Like, I mean, I guess that's government at its best. But I don't understand these numbers, and I don't understand how these things get. Maybe I need to be educated. I'm certainly going to come to your office, and you can educate me on it, because I certainly having a hard time to understand how you spend $1.6 million on a $7 million project just for design. And then we have another, I guess down the agenda, another $1 million for management, right? So that's all I got, Mayor.
All right. Real quick, Trent, on the 165 that's being asked tonight, is that 100% cost borne by the city?
So right now with our advanced funding agreement, I believe we've exhausted the design portion of that, but we do have money available in the project, so we've got to go back through a process with HGAC to allocate those funds. If we overrun on the entire project, we can always go back to HGAC and request additional funds to cover a portion of that. And then this is the project where we did receive a community project grant from directly from Congress through Congressman Nell's office. So we do have other funds to help cover not only these costs, but the rest of the project.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that because again, in an 80-20 situation, this may not be borne 100% by us. We'll have to go through the process, and those get adjusted through the Transportation Policy Council all the time.
Yes, sir.
See that.
Yeah, it goes through the TAC as well as the Policy Council.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, call for the vote.
Member Carbone?
Aye.
Member Cade?
Aye.
Member Berry?
Aye.
Member Patel?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Koza?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
All right. Moving forward to new business continued. Thank you for letting us take that out of order, Council. I'm going to set this up a little bit because items 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all somewhat related. They're all bond related. See Mr. Roebuck here, so I'm going to ask the Mayor Pro Tem to place on the table each one of these. So as we have questions come up, we can talk about them in a holistic sense, and we're not, talking about something that's not on the table. And then at the end, we will take the vote one at a time. I'll call for the vote on 2, and then 3, and then 4, and we'll go through them. All right. So Mayor Pro Tem, if you do that.
Yes, Mayor. Consideration and possible action. First reading of ordinance number 1626. Resolution number R2023-126. Resolution number R2023-128. And resolution number R2023-127. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Staff report before we.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll be brief and then hand it off to Mr. Roebuck. So as you stated, these 4 items basically go together, and they are our annual debt sale. So, of course, this process starts with when we approve our capital improvement program, the CIP budget, back in last summer. that approves that first year of funding to go ahead and move forward with the projects. And then we follow that with an intent to reimburse in October. And that is when we can actually start the project. So then we start working on the projects, and then as we work through the year, we adjust the amount of debt we need to sell based on actual bids and the needs. And what you see here is that results in we've been able to pull down the actual debt sale from what was projected when we did the intent to reimburse. So the four here real quick, we've got our public improvement bonds, which are our standard general obligation bonds that go to the voters. We've got COs for our projects that are reimbursable by the TERS. We've got certificates of obligation for projects that meet the requirements for the use of certificates of obligation per our financial policies. And that's typically when we have other matching funds that we'll use COs for that or for some public safety projects. And then the last piece is COs or certificates of obligation for our water and sewer projects, which we switched to last year due to the lower borrowing cost, lower interest rates, and the lower reserve requirements, which when we do that, we help to moderate the increases in our water and sewer rates. So at this point, I'll hand it off to Mr. John Roebuck with BOK to present all the details with this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Trent. Again, John Roebuck, BOK Financial Securities. Good evening. I think we have a presentation we're going to pull up. Is that correct? Working on it. I can go through the numbers without you seeing them if it'll help. Might confuse even more. Before I get started, though, I do want to say Rick Witty's here. He's your bond counsel with Jackson Walker, and he's the one who drafted the ordinances and the resolution we're asking you to approve tonight. And I'm sure he'll be happy to answer questions you have on the legal documents, and I'll go through the financials here in just a second as we get it loaded up. Perfect. On the first page of the presentation is bond buyer index. This is basically the municipal Dow Jones for the municipal bond market, weekly average of municipal rates across the country. All four bond issues will be general obligation bond issues. One's voted, the other three are certificates of obligation, so they're all tax backed. So we're going to focus here on the blue line, which currently has a rate of a 3.59%. Put that in perspective, that's about 53 basis points below the historical average, and it's off of the low, but we've seen a lot of volatility in the first part of the year. We're starting to see it calm down a little bit. We actually saw rates come down after the Fed did not take action to increase the Fed funds rate last week, but we're in a good place to sell bonds right now. There's investors on the sideline waiting for paper to come. There's not been a lot of volume in the marketplace. So hopefully by the time we get to the market, we'll have some good interest from investors due to your rating and also your name. On the next page, do I have the control of the presentation? All right. Here we go. This is the debt service, estimated debt service and the permanent improvement bonds. We did do a mix based on council's decision a couple of months ago to do a mix of 20 and 30-year debt to match the useful life of the projects that are being financed. We are looking to finance or generate proceeds with roughly $8.2 million. Based on today's markets and interest rates, the premium will generate some premium, so we'll only have to issue $7.7 million in bonds to do so. The next page is estimated sources and uses of funds for the permanent improvement bonds. Again, $7.7 million in principal amount, a premium of $578,000, less expenses of about $107,000, generates a total proceeds of $8,235,000 for the city. And based on, again, current market rates, the estimated all-cost interest rate is 4.491%. And given the, again, the 30-year debt, we're looking at an average life of 18.59 years. The next page, we get into the certificates of obligation. The 2023A COs is for the city's general projects. And again, makes a 20 and 30-year debt. We structured, you'll see that there's kind of a shelf there in 2043 where it goes from about $615,000 principal down to $100,000. That's because, again, we're going to finance more of these projects 20-year, and then, again, there's a couple projects that have a 30-year average life. The second, the 2023B COs, is for the TERS-related projects. It's basically a 7-year debt structure ending in 2030, because that's when the TERS ends. And we are going to put a 3-year call on that so that we basically have the opportunity, once we get reimbursed from the TERS, to pay those off early and remove those from our obligations for the city. The 2023 ACOs, we're going to generate $10,157,000. And then for the 2023 BCOs, we're going to generate 9.3 or almost $9.4 million in proceeds for the city. And then the next page is the estimated source and use of funds. Again, on the left is the general projects. Looking to sell about $9.4 million in principal amount of COs. Premium is about $850,000. Less expenses about $117,000. Again, produces a total proceeds of $10,157,000 for the city. And then the estimated cost of issuance, estimated all cost true interest rate is at 4.155%. And then for the TERS, $9,075,000 in bonds, net premium of about $433,000, expenses about $115,000, for total proceeds of $9,394,000, and a little higher all cost interest rate just because it's a smaller deal, shorter term. Cost of issuance is 4.368%. Then the last one is the water and sewer related certificates of obligation. And this one is actually all 30-year debt because water and sewer projects have a useful life of about 30 years. And we are looking to generate $55.2 million in proceeds for the city. And you'll see it's going to sell about $51.565 million in bonds. And then the next page is the estimated source and use of funds. Total principal of $51.5 million, premium about $4.1 million, and then estimated cost of issuance about $485,000. The total proceeds of $55,247,000. The all cost here is about a 4.414%. And again, these are based on current market rates. Market obviously just changed on a minute by minute basis. But this is the best guess where we are right now. As Trent mentioned earlier, one benefit of selling these water and sewer related bonds as certificates of obligation is lower interest cost, lower interest rate, higher rating, and also no reserve fund. And so in this case, we're going to save basically $3.4 million by not having to fund a reserve fund requirement with these bonds. Then to accomplish all four of these bond sales, we have a schedule of events in the next 2 pages. Tonight we're here for the first reading of the ordinance for the permanent improvement bonds, and then authorize a notice of intent to issue all 3 certificates of obligation. If you all approve that tonight, we'll publish the first notice in the local paper and post on the city's website by July 5th. And then the following week, we'll do it again for the second time on July 12th. But in between, we'll come back on July 10th and do a second reading for the permanent improvement bonds. And the rating agencies and diligence calls will be the week of July 31st, and we'll sell the bonds Monday, August 28th, bring those results to you and ask for your approval that night. And if you all approve those, we'll close about 30 days later on Thursday, September 21st. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have on the financing plan. And again, Mr. Whitty will be happy to answer questions you have on the legal documents we're asking you to approve.
All right, thank you. Trent, any follow-up?
No, sir.
All right, good deal. We'll turn to council for questions, comments, concerns. Mr. Carbone?
Thank you, Mayor. So when you look at the bond buyer index, we're at 3.59%. I guess on a 20-year, when we look at all the all costs were for all these issuance, we're over what 4.4, 4.3, 4.1.
Yes, sir.
Help me understand the difference there.
Well, this is basically a 20-year. We're selling 30-year debt for most of our debt issuances. And also, there's a lot of other factors going to play. You have basically your length, the term. You have the debt structure of the principal amounts to be repaid. If you'll notice the difference between, and I hate doing this, go back and forth in here, but if you look at the difference between permanent improvement bonds and their certificates of obligation, Series 2023A, you'll see the principal structure on the COs is actually more front-end loaded than the permanent improvement bonds. And as a result, the all cost is a little less. See that?
Yep.
And so it's a matter of just the structure. So I mean, I would love to say that everything is based on the bond buyer index, but it's all about the structure and when the principal is being repaid.
What are you seeing in terms of the forward curve?
Hopefully, we start to normalize the yield curve. Right now, we're still inverted in the first couple of years. The 1-year rate is actually higher than the 2, 3, 4, 5-year rate right now. So if you're an investor, you're going to look at the short-term rate as opposed to a 5-year bond.
Right. And what's it look like when you get out, but the difference between your 20 and 30 year?
It's pretty flat, but you're still looking at probably about a 10 to 12 basis point difference between 20 and 30 year. But again, that interest rolls up, so it's a little, I mean, 30 years is gonna have interest rolling up to year one.
Yeah.
Obviously a little more expensive, but
Okay. All right. Thank you.
welcome.
Any other questions, comments?
So, explain this to me. You said it's about 10 basis points, 10 bibs difference between a 20 and 30 year?
10 to 12 right now, but again, that, it's what the rate is, what it actually the city's paying back maybe a little greater than that.
So wouldn't it be for cash flow purpose, wouldn't you want to take a 30 year if the bibs are not that heavy? And then if you have to repay them maybe in 20 years, if you had to make a call?
We have a 10-year call on these, so 10 years we can pay these off.
Okay. So what's can you tell me what the payment difference is between 20 and 30? Do you have it by any chance? I'm just curious.
I do not have that with me, and that'd be a calculation.
Yeah.
So the difference, so one of the things we went through, and this was, gosh, you might have to help me out, Mayor. We did this, 6 months ago, went through this difference between 20 and 30 year and trying to stretch out from 20 to 30 year just to basically try to match the useful life and extend the debt and actually, so the shorter the debt is, the more burden it puts on that 20-year period as opposed to spread it out. You're paying a little higher interest cost by spreading it 30 years, but the annual difference is less, 30-year debt.
I think some of the thoughts behind tying the length of the bonds to the expected life of the infrastructure was who pays for that infrastructure? Are we putting that on the people that are here the next 20 years, or are we going to spread that out over the folks that are also here those last 10 years of the life of the infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought process is in case we have a bad year and our revenues fall, what's the bib, right? The delta that would kind of help us, especially when you're looking at selling these $180 million bonds over the next 5, 6 years.
So 20-year debt, I mean, I'm going to give you an example. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, so got to make these out of the air. But so if a 20-year debt, let's say you have $1 million, you're selling $1 million, and you have average, repayment, let's say $100,000 over 20 years. For 30-year debt, you're going to actually see on an annual basis a smaller amount due. It's probably 90, 95,000, 700,000. So you're going to have less due on an annual basis, but you're extending it 10 more years. So on a taxpayer, you're not going to see an increase in your tax rate as much as you would on a 30-year debt as you would on a 20-year debt.
But you'll end up paying more in higher interest costs and dragging it
Over the
out.
term of
So,
the bond issue.
Over the term. So it's
Trade-offs.
that's really the question. And yeah, and I do think it's wise on COs that you're not paying for something you're paying on it beyond the useful life. So if a useful life is truly 20 years, we don't need to be doing 30-year debt. So that's then enters this equation as well.
And like I mentioned earlier, on the 2023 ACOs, you can see where we really cut it off at 20 years, and then we did a couple projects. You see how it drops in principal amount from 615,000 down to 100,000. So we're not going to take 20-year useful life projects and finance them for 30 years. We're going to try to minimize the impact on the taxpayer.
I like more TERS projects that we can be paid off in 7 years.
Councilman Patel, I mean, I'm spot on with your train of thought. If you're running it with your business, as you'll see through this upcoming budget cycle, you back into your debt service rate, and so there's not a mechanism to finance it at 30 and then pay it off at 20 in the current kind of rate structure we're in. And so we would have to, correct me if I'm wrong, we'd have to somehow do a defeasance plan or something. It's not, I'd equate it to financing your house at a 30-year at 2.75 versus a 15-year at 2.7. Well, yeah, I'm going to take the 30-year for that spread and just pay it off in a 15. You can't do that from a tax rate standpoint, because it forces you to lower that rate to the full 30-year. And so I followed your train of thought, but there's no way that I've seen, and we'll get into it in budget times, but to effectively take advantage of that. And I mean, the whole system's designed because John will be back up here as soon as these come callable and be able to save us millions of dollars and earn some fees and keep playing the game. I mean, that's what happens, but that's, so anyway. And no offense, John. I mean, Rick's back there laughing. He's just not at the podium.
None taken, I don't think. Just got shot. We do have a refunding out there we had not pulled the trigger on yet either because the market hasn't been there for us. So just so you know.
It definitely isn't your normal household or business type of financing. It is different. The municipal finance market is just its own special animal. And I'll call it that because it's tough. I mean, it's just a different way to go about this minefield. Like going back, I put it on a 30, but you still want to pay it off in 15. There's a small break in usually it's a little bit better breaking rate, but there's not. You're obligated for the 30. You have a bad month or 6 months, you drop your payment back. But other than that, you make 2 extra payments a year, and you pay it off in 15.2 years or something like that anyway. So, you know, I've always encouraged people, if you really want to pay it off 15, get a 30-year note, pay it off in 15. It's the same money anyway. But in this, it just doesn't set up that way.
It's set up. It's a balancing act between keeping finances or proceeds for the city and also having something that's marketable to investors.
And it's that's the situation we're in. Just with the massive growth, a lot of this is catch up from that growth. Projects lag behind growth. To your point, Smith Ranch Road, I think we could argue that road should have been done 15 years ago. But there were this and this and this and this and this in front of it. And so it's a catch-up moment that we have there, but we still have to pay for it. That's kind of where we are as a city. We're still, building water and sewer, massive projects. So it's not easy. Any other questions, comments on this? So as I mentioned before, we put 2, 3, 4, and 5 all on the table at the same time. But Madam Secretary, we will call them one at a time so we keep the vote separate. So with that, we will call for the vote on item number 2.
Mayor Pro Tem Kosa,
Aye.
Member Carbone,
Aye. Aye.
Member Cade,
Aye.
Member Barry,
Aye with the asterisk.
Member Patel.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
All right, Madam Secretary, we'll vote on item 3.
Mayor Pro Tem Kosa,
Aye.
Member Carbone,
Aye.
Member Cade,
Aye.
Member Barry,
Aye.
Member Patel.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Madam Secretary, we'll vote on item 4.
Mayor Pro Tem Kosa,
Aye.
Member Carbone,
Aye.
Member Cade,
Aye.
Member Barry,
Aye with a footnote.
Member Patel.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
And last one, we'll vote on item 5.
Mayor Pro Tem Kosa,
Aye.
Member Carbone,
Aye.
Member Cade,
Aye.
Member Barry,
Aye.
Member Patel.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you all.
Thank you, John. We'll see you, I guess, in a couple of weeks on the second reading of that one. With that, we'll move forward in our agenda. Ms. Cade, if you would present new business item number 6, please.
Consideration and possible action. First reading of ordinance number 1619-2. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. This first reading of this ordinance is our normal mid-year budget adjustment. We do about this time every year, and it's based on basically our current revenues and current expenditure projections through the end of this fiscal year. It also helps establish the starting point for our FY24 budgeting process. With this budget amendment, there are no additional allocations or expenditures for the general fund, and Ms. Rachel Winslow, our budget officer, is going to walk us through the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for your time this evening. So tonight's agenda will include the general fund our tax-backed debt service fund, enterprise operating fund, some other fund changes, and future dates. Start by reviewing general fund revenue changes. Revenue changes net decreased $955,000 for the FY23 projections. Revenue increases include sales tax, interest earnings, miscellaneous FEMA revenue, and franchise fees. Decreases relate primarily to licenses and permits, charges for services, including the TERS admin fee and property taxes. All revenue adjustments made for this budget amendment are based on actual revenues received through May. While licenses and permits are seeing significant decreases, it's anticipated the expected revenue will impact future years. And property tax decreases are based on year-to-date collection rate. Adjustments based on property tax collections are made annually as part of this projections process. The expenditure changes for the general fund net to $406,000 increase. The primary driver of the increases are salary and benefit accounts, which increased about 1%. This is due to accrual payouts and adjustments for public safety overtime. Council will be pleased to know that operating costs within the general fund largely remained flat or varied by less than $100,000 as departments are carefully managing their budgets in this inflationary environment. The general fund income statement reflects the audited beginning fund balance for FY23 and the respective changes to revenues and expenditures. As you can see, we finished with a 90-day reserve and $26,000 over policy minimum, and the difference between the current FY23 amended budget over policy amount and the proposed over policy amount is reflective of the projected revenue decreases. This time we'll transition into the tax-backed debt service fund. Revenues in the debt service fund will have a net increase of $8.9 million. Revenue increases are based on the DAP reimbursement and recognizing increased interest earnings. And revenue decreases include property taxes decreasing to reflect actual collections and estimated long-term bond proceeds. Revenues now reflect the actual amount received from the bond refunding and defeasance efforts. The debt service income statement reflects the current position of the debt service fund. It currently shows the city is $1 million under the 10% policy reserve. This is in a large part, next slide. Yes, our MUD rebates also increased 4% and our expenditures decreased based off of the defeasance and restructuring efforts. Apologies. This is in large part due to the additional expenditures relating to the defeasance and the debt restructuring. It's also impacted by the decreased revenue compared to expenditures. It is anticipated that this will balance out in fiscal year 24 with revenues and expenditures once more in alignment and the 10% policy reserve met. Additionally, I checked with Mr. Roebuck, and he says that this is a city 10% reserve policy, and we do not have any bond requirements that require us to maintain that 10% reserve. The Enterprise Operating Fund has several changes to revenue. Overall, revenue is expected to increase by about $5 million. It includes increases to charges for services, sewer and water sales, as well as miscellaneous reimbursements and interest earnings. Revenue decreases include charges for services administrative fee. The expense operating changes include increases to the purchase of water at FM 521 and Alice, as well as professional and contractual services, repair and maintenance of lift stations, sewer plants, and water wells, and expenditure decreases include salaries and wages, as well as chemicals. The Enterprise Fund operating income statement reflects the changes in revenue and expenditures and shows that we are meeting our operating cash minimums for FY23. The additional appropriations in this budget amendment are all related to our special revenue funds, and there are 3 of them this year. In our Federal Police Seizure Fund, there's a $75,000 appropriation to purchase 2 drones to continue developing the Drone as a First Responder program. Our motor pool is appropriating $45,000 for the purchase of 1 transit van for a crime scene investigator position. And from our PEG fund, there will be an appropriation of $144,500 for the purchase of a trailer-mounted LED screen for events. The second reading of projections will be July 10th for Budget Amendment 2, and our future schedule shows meetings related to the fiscal year 24 budget. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Good. Trent, any follow-up to that?
No, we'd just be happy to answer any questions.
All right, with that, we'll turn it to council for questions and comments. Ms. Cade?
I want, Rachel, on slide 7, you said property tax decrease, and you said collections. Is that why it's decreased?
Yes, it's based on our collection rate, what we're actually seeing coming into the city.
Thank you.
So maybe a little bit to expound on that. So one of the things that in the tax worksheets, when they changed after Senate Bill 2, is it changed a little bit of the way it looks at your collection rate. And so we adjusted that down when we saw this last year. And so we're kind of digging into that and trying to scrutinize why the collection tax rate in the current tax worksheet, it's like at about 104%. What's driving that and how that impacts this? Why are we seeing then that the collections are coming in lower? So we're really kind of digging into this part of the tax worksheet to make sure we can tighten this down when we move into next year's budget.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Carbone?
Thank you, Mayor. If you go to slide 9, so the 10% policy minimum, that's a city policy. Where are we on our bond covenants?
I spoke with Mr. Roebuck, and he said specific to general fund tax-backed debt, there are no bond covenants that we're required to meet. You did say the ratings agencies and so on do like to see a policy minimum, but he felt that we were meeting that requirement.
Okay. I mean, this is just the debt service side, so essentially we're the amendment, the budget amendment 2 you show on the screen, that was the refunding we've already done. And so there's really no, I guess, current or future action. This is just adjusting to actuals. Am I thinking about that right?
Yes.
Okay, and then if you go to slide 14, pick on Josh for a second. So you're gonna go buy a screen mounted or a trailer mounted TV with PEG funds, and we're gonna catch a rash of stuff up here because the city's wasting taxpayer dollars on a trailer mounted TV screen. So can you give us a 2-minute talk over PEG funds and what we can use them on and why this?
Yes, sir. Happily, I can do that. PEG funds are franchise fees that we get from cable subscriptions that help support the content and the cable channel that is public education, information, and government, the PEG acronym. And so these funds can only be used for capital outlays that directly support that content and that channel. So this is essentially a TV screen that helps us promote all of the content. And the other things we can purchase, like our mobile production van that allows us to do production on location, our camera equipment, the train depot that we'll be using for storage space and for studio space. So the things we can't pay for staff expenses, we can't pay for fuel, we can't pay for small things. It's only capital outlays, and it's not taxpayer funds. It's franchise fees off of cable subscriptions. Thank you for that opportunity.
All right, thank you. That's all I had, Mayor.
Just as a follow-up, Josh, how much in PEG funds do we have sitting?
There's roughly $1 million sitting in that account right now.
And how much do we generate on an annual basis?
Just over $200,000 a year.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, we'll call for the vote.
Member Cade?
Aye.
Member Berry?
Aye.
Member Patel? Mayor Pro Tem Koza?
Aye.
Member Carbone?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
With that, Mr. Patel, would you present item 7, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Consider impossible action resolution number R2023-148. So move.
We have a motion and a second. Mayor Pro Tem seconded it. I'm not sure if you heard that. Staff report?
Thank you, Mayor. This contract is for the construction management, construction inspection, and the construction material testing services associated with the Smith Ranch Road project that we discussed earlier. So I won't go back through the details of the actual road project and its scope, but it's the widening of Smith Ranch Road, basically 518 to Hughes Ranch Road. Again, a TIP-funded project, so these costs will be 80% federally funded, 20% locally funded, and we expect to bid the project this fall. When we do these federally funded projects, there is a significant increase in the paperwork and documentation that has to go into monitoring the construction so that we get reimbursed. And so we have typically on all these projects hired an engineering firm to help with those services. So they will provide a construction manager, probably multiple inspectors to be on the job on a daily basis, and then the construction material testing that has to occur to make sure all the materials as well as the construction meet the specifications of the project. This team just successfully completed the McCard Road project for us, doing the same scope of work. So we recommend award to HDR in the estimated amount of $983,797.20. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we'll turn it over to questions, comments from council.
So, Mayor, I went through this, and really the spreadsheet you gave us, Trent, with the cost breakdown, I just couldn't understand. They have 15 people assigned to this project to work on, or at least 15 positions, let's just say. And I don't understand. I believe this is a 3,300 feet. That's what I think your memo had said that they're building out. Can you, I wasn't on this council, so can you tell me how much they charged us to do McCard Road? Do you remember by any chance for their services?
Quite a bit more than this one. That was a much larger project, but I don't have the numbers at my fingertips. I'm sure the hours being applied here are very similar. I would expect that their rates are a little bit higher than we did when we did the McCard Road project. But the scope's going to be very similar and same amount of hours per, size of project as we saw in McCard.
So how do we pick these guys compared to somebody else? Explain the process, I guess.
So again, being engineering services, it's qualification-based selection process. And so we go through, when we do one of these federal projects, we actually go through a full qualification-based selection process where we advertise scope of the project, firms submit their qualifications that get reviewed against the needs of the project. And then once you go through that, we usually will shortlist and then interview the finalist and then make a selection. The law requires us to select the most qualified firm based on demonstrated competencies. And so we make the selection based off of that. And then the next part of the statute that we're following for this type of selection is that you then work to negotiate a contract for those services. If we can't come to an agreement with them on the scope and the price, we end those negotiations and we go to the next most qualified firm. So this firm rose to the top because of their past work for us on very, very similar scope of work and their performance on those projects, and that they've got the same team put together to perform that on this project. And as far as, the different positions, you've got engineers that are involved, project managers, then you've got your on-site, construction managers and inspectors, and then also the material testing folks, and then the folks that are doing all of the, basically the records keeping and the documentation that has to be collected and turned into TxDOT on a monthly basis.
I have one question.
Ms. Kate?
Okay, so we did, item F, we passed the what was it, professional services contract for
That's
the Smith
design.
Ranch
It's additional design work.
widening project. And this is now management services contract for Smith Ranch Road. That's hard to say, widening project, sorry. So when is this gonna begin? And when is the ultimate goal for it to finish?
So we're scheduled, I believe, to get to bid the project this late summer, early fall timeframe. So when we bid one of these projects, once we have the bids in and evaluate them, we have to go back through TxDOT to get approval to award. That usually takes 2-3 months, and then we get things awarded and have a pre-construction meeting and start construction. So depending on how late it is this fall, we may run into, the holidays. So it's going to start sometime, probably the construction will start sometime late fall, early 2024. And then the construction, I believe, is estimated for about a 12-month schedule.
I guess what I really want to know is, are we going to see these again in a year?
For this project? No. So this is a construction management contract. It is hourly based. So if we were to run into something unknown at this point that extended the construction well beyond what the current construction schedule estimate is, and we have to have inspectors and people on the project for a longer period of time, there's the possibility that that happens. But typically we're able to keep these within the time and the scope, but it's construction and it's existing corridors, and there's stuff we run into. But I would expect it would, for this project, we'll be close to this and probably not need to come back and amend it unless something significant occurs during the construction.
Thank you. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be difficult. I really am curious.
So,
Sure.
Trent, real quick, just not necessarily on this project, but just projects in general, a road project in general. Describe, not the process, but describe the different disciplines, consultants that,
Sure.
that have to go through it that are outside of construction.
So we have our civil designers, so civil engineering, and they do the bulk of the design work. Now, what we will usually do is we'll have a prime consultant or a prime design firm, and they will bring in, under their contract, you've typically got to have a geotechnical firm come in to do your geotechnical work to determine, if you've got foundations or you've got a subgrade, what you're dealing with there and how you have to design that. And then you've got your environmental firms that work you through the environmental process. On our local projects, you're typically dealing potentially with wetlands and wetlands permitting. When we get the federal funds, we've got to go through a full-blown NEPA process, which is a much more extended environmental approval process. Surveying is another sub to the prime consultant usually. So obviously they're doing all your survey work to base the project on. They're doing all your parcel mapping or your land acquisition. And then, as I mentioned earlier, under a lot of these federal projects, we'll stick the land acquisition firm under there. On our projects, we usually run that as a separate contract. And so what that is if we've got a significant number of parcels to acquire, we can't manage that ourselves. So we bring in a firm that actually manages making the offers and working through the acquisition process with the property owners. Another contract associated with that is doing the appraisals of the land. So we've got to do fair market value appraisals so that when we make these offers, they're based on a fair market value appraisal. So there's a contract for that. I'm probably missing something, but then once we move towards construction, we do a lot of construction management ourselves in-house. We have a couple of construction managers. We have construction inspectors. We'll use them to the extent we can. The inspectors are also working our developer projects, looking at our infrastructure on those. So we use them to the largest extent we can, but when we get into these federally funded projects, we bring in an outside firm because the paperwork is just so much greater, and having somebody that knows that process and does that on a regular basis, it's better for us to go that route or we'd lock down all of our construction folks just on one project. And so then probably the last one is your construction material testing firm. So, your bids, your plans and specifications, say what the material has to be, what specifications it has to meet, and then out in the field, as you're constructing things, what specifications things have to meet. So they come in and they're testing the strength of your concrete, they're testing the density of your subgrade, they're testing compaction on all of your underground utilities. So they're actually out in the field doing those standardized tests so that we get those test report and say it's good. If it's not good, the contractor's got to pull it out and redo it. So I think that probably covers most of it.
That's probably 95%, if not 100% on some projects. So in this particular one, are they doing a constructability review before it goes out to bid?
So I believe we do have that in the scope for them to take a look at the plans as we, kind of take them from 90 to 100%.
Right.
Provide those final bit of comments, help us make sure we got a good tight set of plans.
So what it is it's a separate set of eyes beyond the designer that's taking a look at it. And I'll tell you, we actually changed our process when we were doing the bond program in 01. As we were moving to the 07, we kind of changed our process where we brought this firm, the construction manager, in before it went to bid. A lot of times before, we brought them in after. And what we were finding by bringing them after is the same set of eyes see the same thing every day, and they miss something that's in the plans. Our people are seeing this on a routine basis, and they miss something that's in the plans. You bring in that third set of eyes, and they see something from a constructability, and they go, I see that, but you can't construct that. Or I see this bust. On the flip end, you have contractors that when these bids go out, they'll come in, contractor, A will come in and look at these plans, and they will pour over them with a fine-tooth comb, and if they can find the bust that's in the plans, they'll sharpen their pencil, they'll get it, and that change order is going to cost us dearly. They knew it before they ever started. They know it's there, and they're going to hit us with a change order because they know it's sitting there waiting. You can't construct that, or there's something missing. So this is part of this is tightening up that set of plans before it goes out. When we put this in place, our change orders dropped drastically in our program. Now, you still have some. Most of them are quantity adjustments on the back end. You need a little more concrete, a little less, or this, that. It's just closing out a project. Or you open up the ground, and there's a gas line that is not on anybody's radar, but you got to go deal with it, right? That's a change order that you have to happen that's unforeseen. So it's really making sure that it's getting out into the bid world in the right frame and in the right, it's tight. We're just tightening it up. So we decided to bring them in before going to bid as opposed to after to help do some of those kind of things. And the dollars ultimately we saved, not all of this, but some of that constructability review and others in taking change orders from here to here. So, and it's funny, I've told some contractors that's what we did. This was way back when, and they all got pretty upset because we called them on their game.
I did confirm this does include constructability review.
All right, there you go. So we'll get in, they'll take a look at it before it ever goes to bid, and we'll have an opportunity to correct something if they find it, which I think is good. So last call for questions. Seeing none, Madam Secretary, call for the vote.
Member Patel,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Koza,
Aye.
Member Carbone,
Aye.
Member Cade,
Aye.
Member Berry.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-1.
All right, with that, matters moved from consent agenda, already handled. Other business, no, there was none. Mayor council issues for city council discussion, there is none. We'll move to the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment at 8:05.